So I'd love to welcome everybody along today. Thank you for participating in the session with us. And of course, first and foremost, I want to welcome Cameron Gleeson along. And Cameron, thank you so much for taking the time out of, I know what is a very busy schedule, to talk to the audience today about Quitch in the trades, I guess, and in particular in plumbing is your area. So you're in Darwin. We hadn't realised until we got on board with you right now, Cameron. So Cameron, I'm going to just again welcome you, and if you could give perhaps the audience some background on, we know you started off your career in plumbing and then you ended up teaching in the trades, and in particular bringing technology and forward thinking into that area. So Cameron, I'll hand over to you if you can give us some background and some of what you've been up to.
Oh yes, thanks Grania. Yeah, well, I'm a teacher by trade now. I've probably been doing teaching for as long as I did the trades for now. It's been nearly 20 years. So I've studied teaching. I studied high school teaching and I did all the TAFE teaching as well. And I was really interested in different ways to engage students and different ways to teach and to get away from the PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint and the monologue of standing up the front, because it's not just exhausting for the students, it's exhausting for teachers as well, and it burns you out. So, getting in touch with something like Quitch was really, really great for me, because it was an application that the students could get onto, and it would back up what you're doing. It's like a different channel for students to pick up on what's happening in the classroom in front of you. So when you timed your questions and you delivered some information, or you had an activity in your class, say we were doing like safety was really, really important, because you have to re-deliver that message. You can't just say to a bunch of students, okay, when you are in a workshop, you have to wear gloves, or when you're in a workshop, you have to wear safety glasses. You have to really reinforce that message and tell them why they're doing it and give them a background of that information. And Quitch is really good for that. And then they start getting onto the leaderboard and they start competing with each other. And then you sort of hands off. The students start to run with each other and start asking each other for information, and that's what you want. You want to try and promote that student-to-student contact, and that's what Quitch does. But, yeah.
Great. So Cameron, I'm going to go back a step, because I'm not sure with the audience how familiar they are with the Quitch technology. So I'll give a quick overview. So Quitch is a gamified mobile learning platform, and it was first introduced exactly in the way Cameron in fact used it, so to reach students outside of the classroom, because as Cameron said, we can engage them when we've got them in front of us, but it's when they leave, and especially I guess with apprentices who are on the job as well as having some time in the classroom, that you were able to reach them. So Cameron, am I right in saying that you would run the session and then you would push questions, which obviously we know gets delivered to their mobile phone, to kind of consolidate that learning that they had in class? Is that in the way that you were tending to use it?
Yes. Well, I think in one of your papers, Grania, you called it chunking. Yes. So chunking the question. So you start off the day and you do a short session. So, I suppose if you had a lack of planning, and sort of what people might expect from a classroom is you go into a classroom and you have some information maybe on a PDF or in a book, and you would read it out, or you might do a PowerPoint presentation. What I would do is use as many different electronic sources as I can, audio, video, and other ways, animated PowerPoint presentations, and then keep that short, and then save the last 10 or 15 minutes of that 45-minute session for the Quitch questions to come out. But what you would do beforehand is you get your gamified app, and you set up, as a teacher, you set up the questions so that they come out on time. So you plan to teach this little bit. Say we're teaching something about ladder safety, height safety, which is really, really important in the building industry. It kills height accidents kill more people than anything else, falling from heights. So and the injuries are even more, long-term injuries from falling from heights. So you teach that for half an hour, and then you spend 10 or 15 minutes waiting for the Quitch questions to come out. So as you're finishing that sort of lesson, the students' phones start going off because they're getting delivered. You've asked them to turn on the notifications and they're getting delivered 3 or 4 questions. So it's not too taxing on them, but the questions relate directly to what you've just done. And then, you might have a break or you might do something else. And then the next session, you do the same thing. So the questions come out across the day. And, if you're falling behind time as a teacher, you can get onto the app and you can change the times that the questions come out. And I found with these students that I was teaching who had, they had different levels of literacy, or what some TAFE teachers might call these different literacies. They might have different concepts of literacy. So you have to cater to that. And Quitch does that because you can link it to videos, and you can link it to, you can use images and all kinds of messages like that. So it's not just written messages. But,
yeah, I think that was actually, Cam, when you were designing the class, and I think this was some of the feedback we got from the apprentices, how valuable that particular part of it was, because you had created some short YouTube clips on, for example, how to set up a pump. I might not have quite the right detail there, but and you also, I remember you had some different images of how you put something together and so on, of where different elements should be. And I know in the feedback that we got from the apprentices, they were saying that those YouTube clips, the images themselves, and then the fact that you were asking questions around that it actually really helped to consolidate the learning for them. And I think some of the other feedback we got was, and I think you had mentioned this at the time as well, was that the manuals they have, and there's a lot of regulation for them to learn, and you were able to take that out of the manual and break it down, as you said, into those chunks. So you had a little chunking learning of around safety risks, in terms of height. I know there was an element on water as well. There was various different elements. And I think that was something that was really valuable to the apprentices. I think one of the things they had said to me was the fact that it was a mobile solution rather than a desktop was very valuable to them. Did you have any kind of feedback around that, or do you think that kind of mobile application worked particularly well for them?
I think so, yeah. Well, what I've been told before, it's a self-pathway. So if you let the students choose where they want to learn, like a digital location, they would choose their phones, or they would, if you gave them tablets, they would choose the tablets because they're used to that. They're doing that all the time. They're basically like me too. I'm attached to my phone, And so I think, yes. And you might see the image is of a square of grass with all the pathways around it, and then you see a worn pathway through the dirt on a diagonal across the grass, and that's a self pathway. So, if you try to force the students to go onto the computers or the platforms that you want them to go on, and you don't ask them, they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to get together and they're going to go somewhere else, and you're not going to have control of it. So using the mobile devices is just that. The students seem to prefer that, but then there's some who don't. There's some who might want a desktop, because they've got certain requirements, or maybe a disability. They might have a vision impairment, or they might be neurodiverse. So those you got to leave. You don't just have one option. You need to have a lot of options for students.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, that's right. There's not a one size fits all. And Cameron, I was going to ask you. So, in particular, if you could talk a little bit about how Quitch helped you as an educator, in terms of the at risk and not participate and so on. So you as an educator versus the feedback from the students themselves, if you could talk, or the apprentices, if you could talk a little bit about that. Yeah,
well, the feedback was that they like the mobile app, and they like the fact that it was what we call multimodal, which is what we're talking about with the videos and the photos and the audio. So there was that feedback from the students, and if you went on to Quitch, you could identify the students who weren't picking up Quitch, who weren't answering the questions or trying to answer the questions and getting them wrong. And it's another way to identify those students so you can get them the help that they need. Like Swinburne has all of those support services. So you have to be really careful when you're dealing with students at risk, as we all know. You can't just walk up to them and say, you're getting it wrong. And you have to make it sort of a private conversation, but and you have to be you have to try and understand their backgrounds. We're dealing with students from some of them are from a low socioeconomic background, and also there's other things like there's substance abuse that happens with that cohort, and also there's some gambling issues that I've seen, that I've had contact with. So you got to be very careful and talk to people, and realize that you can't do it all. So using Quitch, you can find those students and you can refer them to the services that they need, and then that way, when they come back to class, you're able to teach them. So you don't have to be the social worker, but Quitch can really help you with them.
And I think that was, some feedback that we had got from other people in the trades as well, and indeed across the board, that Quitch will identify for you those who are at risk as early. I mean, you can do that. It's in real time, so you can find out at the end of week 1 who's at risk and so on. But as you were saying, it allows you then the ability to reach out to that group on their mobile phone. So the fact that we know now when they are at risk, we know as early as possible in their training and so on, then we can, of course, set up, as you say, support structures. And then, of course, what we find is that much more people, the earlier we intervene and support, the much greater chance of success. So for each of the TAFEs and so on, or whichever institution, we then have much greater success rate as a result of that, because we know the sooner we support, the much greater chance we have of, people succeeding.
Yes.
Cameron,
please
continue.
Just with TAFE students, it can be very quiet, and the reason, a lot of the times when you do get in and find those at-risk students, you can create a much noisier class, and that's really helpful, because there's a lot going on with TAFE students that you need to dig up.
I think that's, and I mean, I think one of the things you and some others had raised with us as well was the concern around literacy levels and so on. So again, I think you had said to us at one stage that's something that potentially, which we can of course offer through Quitch as well. So they could have, ability to practice those basic literacy and numeracy skills as well. So I mean, that's something we could look at including with the plumbing content. I mean, Cameron, you and Swinburne for the Department of Education and Training, we know you guys created all of the content, which is now available for every Victorian TAFE. I know we have some representatives probably from other states as well, but the Department of Education and Training here have now offered all of that content. So there was the plumbing content and the carpentry content as well, which is now free and available for all the TAFEs in Victoria. I guess the other question I was going to ask you, Cam, how often do those regulations, or how often would that content for plumbing change? Is that something that would change regularly and needs to be updated, or how can we understand that better?
Well, if you're doing the foundation subjects, it's not. It's more related to the safety standards, and they do change. So there's those, and but once you get into the actual content, like the plumbing content, the gas fitting and roofing and water and sewerage, the regulations get updated probably once every 5 years. And it's normally the same principles, like they're all on the same principles. Like the gas ones now are changing much more rapidly than they used to, because gas fitting is really changing a lot, with renewable energy and the real push to make much more efficient gas appliances. Gas fitting is changing a lot. So probably once every 5 years. And then they usually change the numbers. So you might have the same clause in the Australian standards, but it will be a different number. So chapter 10 will become chapter 11 because they've put a different chapter 9 in, things like that. But you do need to go and redo your questions when that happens, because you need to change all your references and all your numbers.
So I guess, well, from what I understand of the vet sector, I mean, in Victoria, of course, there are a number of TAFEs, but then, of course, New South Wales and Queensland have one, which in terms of that consistency of learning is probably much better. That we have a consistent training that we're delivering across those students, whereas in Victoria, we have a variety, which was, I know when one of the issues when the Department of Education and Training funded Quitch and Swinburne to build and adapt this tool for the vocational education sector, I know that was one of the issues they were concerned about, the different ways courses were delivered across the TAFEs. And I think that was one of the very valuable things that came out of that project as well, was the fact that the content that you and your team and Swinburne built was then able to be shared across all of the other TAFEs in Victoria, which of course then you get that consistency of learning and consistency of delivery of that content to your apprentices. But there was one other question on that, Cam, I was going to ask you. Do you think if you had Quitch when you were doing your plumbing training a few years ago, how do you think it might have been valuable to you?
Oh, that's a very hard question. That's a very hard question to answer, Grania. I couldn't imagine having Quitch when I was, my speaker's going off here. I'm just going to turn it off. Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. Yeah, definitely. Like, to tell you the truth, I really struggled with plumbing training because I came from year 11 studying humanities and geography and politics and things, and I didn't relate to, and that's probably why I teach the way I do now, because I'm thinking of those people. You know, a lot of the teaching was, here's a book, read the book, answer the questions, or I don't think we even had PowerPoint presentations in can I say the year 1984, and it definitely would have made a lot of difference to me, and I would have got right into that, like having Quitch, if anyone had heard of a mobile phone at that stage.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's one of the things the apprentices, when we were running the focus groups with your groups, that's one of the things I know they said over and over again. We're attached to our mobile phones. We do everything here. And I remember one of the other things that stood out, that what they were saying was the notification. So each time, as you know, when new content is unlocked, they get a notification to let them know that this material is now ready for them to revise. But as well as that, of course, you can send them announcements telling them about some event that might be coming up and so on. But one of the things I do remember is that they talked about how powerful the notifications were, because they said that that's kind of how they function. I actually personally, I thought after a while notifications might become a little annoying, but they told me that that was my age was the issue there, that they love getting notifications. That's the way they function. They said then they don't waste time, was one of the things they said, which I thought was really interesting, logging into an LMS and so on. And they said, well, there's nothing new from the previous time I had been there. Whereas if they're nudged and prompted, this material is now available, you've got 24, 72 hours to complete it and so on. It just kept that engagement level up, and kept things front of mind. And I think the other thing that stood out to me was, it was mainly men, I will say generally, in the plumbing, in the apprentice groups that I met, there was some females. But the men in particular talked about the competitive nature of the leaderboard and so on, which they thought was a lot of fun. And as you remember, we had some prizes and so on. So we had, I think, some Bunning vouchers and various things, which again was that other incentive. I think it added a lot of value for them. Well,
we had some fancy marking pencils. They were very sought after. That class, But I just think what you're saying, that's one thing I haven't mentioned too, is that you can prep your class for when they come back in, because with apprentices, the model they use at Swinburne is they train 1 week at a time. There's 22 weeks in the basic course, so the apprentices will do, I think, 7, 7, and 8, or 6, 8 and 8, something like that. For the 3 years of the Certificate 3 in plumbing. So when they're coming in for their week, you've got to realise that they've been away for 3 weeks. They've been at work. So, they're in their work world, which has got nothing to do, it's really separate. It's a different vibe to TAFE, and they really enjoy coming to TAFE. And so on the Thursday and the Friday before they come back, you can send them a few questions, and you can prepare them for this. You have to, like you were saying with a notification, it's the teacher's job to set up those notifications at the start, to get everyone onto the notifications, to set up your own notifications, and to make sure that everyone's going to, as many people as possible are going to get them. So it's not, it is automated, but still there's still a bit of work for you as a teacher to do to get all that that messaging out. And doing that on the Thursday and the Friday before they come back in prepares them, and you're kind of starting to flip the classroom, which is a concept that I first heard of from the Khan Academy, which is sponsored by Microsoft. It's a maths academy, online maths academy. And what that does is, so instead of delivering the basic information in the classroom and then the students going away and kind of doing homework and coming back, it's the opposite. You give them the basic information before they come in, and once they come in, they're at a different level of learning, and you can push that student-to-student engagement.
Yeah. And I remember, so one of the other things that you had done was you had made some short YouTube clips, and you talked about, if my memory serves me, you talked about the content that you would be covering in that next week, and you were doing that flipped classroom almost through those YouTube clips, and then they kind of knew what to prepare for. You had some questions at the beginning, and I think then you were following up with questions after you had delivered the course to see what that kind of, retention of the knowledge was.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we used some SCORM content, which is, if anyone doesn't know what SCORM is, it's videos that are embedded with questions. So the video advances along and then it stops and there's a question, and they can't keep watching the video until they get the question right. That content we've gone away from that a little bit because when needed, it's not recognised by screen readers and doesn't fit with our universal design learning that we've adapted at Swinburne, or we've taken on at Swinburne. But those type of things are really anything like that where you can put the information out first, but then you leave the information there so the students can then go back and revise it, and especially the ones who are using it at work. Like if you've got someone who's doing general plumbing and they don't do roofing, but they have to learn roofing, basic roofing as part of their apprenticeship, well, they probably just want to get through it. They want to just learn the real basics of it. But someone who does roofing all the time, they want to get a little bit more. They're going to probably do the same course they're going to get more out of the course. So they can use those videos again and again. Like I had one, which was, I think that went on to Quitch, was how to apply silicon. I'd been we've been having discussions with various people over the years in the trade and at school about silicon, and it's a big argument amongst tradespeople about the best way to clean it and to do it. And I just made a video to put the cat amongst the pigeons and say, well, this is the result of a debate. What do you think about this method of silicon? And that one was it gave people something to latch onto, because you don't get lessons in that. It's so kind of taken for granted applying silicon to sheet metal that everyone just says, oh, just do it. Doesn't matter how you do it. But, we like at trade school, we like to try and up the standard a little bit. And then the theory is that when the students go back out to the workplace, if the standard's higher at trade school, then when at the workplace, it'll be somewhere approaching that,
It makes perfect sense to me, Cam. And I think that was one of the very valuable things when we start working with you, was for those kind of practical courses like the plumbing and so on, was that those short kind of video clips and so on, showing how something was done, rather than it written on a PDF and so on. I think that was something the students had said as well was very valuable to them, that they could actually then picture the whole thing. And then I think you had some images along with those as well.
Yes, there was all images, and I would just use any combination of modes that I could, because there are some students who like to read, and there are some students, or there's some students who watch the video and then they want to read about it as well. And so there's a lot of different ones, but and you'll get experienced, like for that silicon one, you'll get an experienced roofer in a class, so you show it to them and they'll give you feedback on it. They'll say, no, you need to change it or whatever, and then it's out there, and people, and those resources are adaptable as well. So you can take them up and, change them or take them down, those type of things.
Yeah, I think, and that's exactly right. And it's very easy to edit that kind of thing in Quitch. And I think the other thing is, once you've set up your course, then it takes a little bit of time to set up to begin with, as you said, but then once it's set up, you simply clone it going forward. But based on the feedback you get, and I know you did that, then you actually amended or edited some of those resources or images that you had up to just make it a little bit clearer going forward. And I think that's an important part of it as well, in which we have that in-app feedback, which of course allows us to always keep getting that feedback from the apprentices and students and so on, so that you can keep improving the content that you're delivering to them as well. And they've got no problem with telling us when the things should be improved, which I personally think is great, because it just keeps, as you say, keeps that standard high. If we, continue to get that feedback, take it on board and improve what's being, delivered to them, I think makes for a great experience.
Well, I think that feedback loop, we've always attempted to have the feedback loop with any kind of teaching, but with Quitch, it gives you the real-time, high-speed feedback, so you can actually change the course as it's going. So if you've got a 1 year, like a second year of training, the students can, you look for common threads, you look for common feedback. So if you've got 4 or 5 people who have used the same word saying, oh, inadequate, or, we need more, or something like that, then I might even contact them and say, what did you mean? And then try to fix it. And that way, because, the old theory that when one person says something, there's probably 4 or 5 others in the class who think the same thing. So, but yeah, they'll go and have a good chat about it at Smoko. You'd love to be a fly on the wall, but probably not.
Sometimes it might be better if not.
yeah.
But I think you're right, Cam, in that sense that giving the student a voice, and I think that's something that we've heard from other people as well, because it's an individual, competition, if you like, that they're understanding and consolidating, reinforcing the learning that's been delivered to them. But then also they always seem to get together and have a chat about Quitch and how it's going, and they come together and discuss what can be improved. And usually there'll be 1 or 2 of those who's willing to share that with us, which is great, because that's, exactly what we want. We want to keep that coming. But I'm just suddenly conscious of the time, and we talked for a little bit longer than I thought we might. So I was going to have, 10 minutes for Q&A. So we would love to hear from the audience and see if you've got any questions, in particular for Cam, I guess. And of course, any from me either, I'll be more than happy to answer. So do we have any questions at the moment? Anything you would like some clarification on? I'll give you a moment. So Cam, there's a question there. Did you receive any feedback that a mobile solution was particularly convenient for apprentices?
Well, I don't remember the specific feedback, but I remember that, because we had regional apprentices as well. So, we were in the outer east of Melbourne. So, we were getting apprentices from right out past Warburton and places like that. And they said they liked the mobile app because it kept them in touch with trade school, and especially that sending the questions a couple of days before they came back in. They said they really liked that because, it just kept them in touch with the school.
Great, thank you. And is Quitch open to everyone, or can it be for a specific group?
I think I'll pass that one to you, Grania.
Yeah, I think if I understand the question correctly, so what we can do is you can either, let's say if you had 200 students, in this case they're apprentices in a class, you could open it up to all of them, or you also have the option, you might want to clone that content and just deliver it in the smaller groups, for example, tutorials, or those who are working for different organizations and so on. So you can have either or, I guess, is the answer to that. Have I answered your question correctly? Is that what you were looking for, or was there something else you were meaning? So hopefully
that's Hanson. Yeah, I think. Well, my answer would be all right. When I installed the app, I saw Marketplace and thought that it was open like you did.
Okay, now I see what you mean by open. Okay, so there are 2 different things there. So let's say, for example, Swinburne University has a Quitch license. So what they do is they would set up a class that is accessible, can be accessed only by Swinburne University students, because they will be invited to that class. Versus we have a marketplace which is open to the public. If they want to practice their skill set on plumbing or mathematics or science, whatever, they're welcome to do that. So there's the 2 options. So there's an institution will purchase a license and allow access by their students only. And then we've got a marketplace which is open to the public. So hopefully, Hassan, that answered your question. And both work with the same app is exactly right. So it's just one app. Yeah. You're very welcome. Any other questions for myself or Cam? So Cam, I'll let you answer that one, Cam.
Oh yeah, they're very competitive. Like give them a competition and make it, worthwhile, and a pencil, fancy pencil to compete for, and they'll go for it. And I found that in the first bit, they was kind of like, oh, what's this? I don't really know what this is. After they'd installed the app and they kind of had a go at it. And then they saw someone getting a prize, brand new prize, still in the box, and they're like, "Oh, I want to get a prize." So yes, the answer to that's yes, Raphael. Yeah.
Very competitive. So on that note, because we're right on time, Cam, can I say a huge thank you from both myself and I'm sure the panelists who have learned a lot from what you've offered to us today. And I guess as a final note, I will ask you, what would you say to any one of the panelists considering introducing Quitch to their apprentices? What would your advice be?
My advice would be to get your questions in order first. So don't worry about Quitch, and don't worry too much about the technology first. Use the what's it called? It's a quadrant. It's where you use content, and so get your content together first, and then adapt the content to the technology, so that it will end up. Then the technology looks much smarter when the content is made using principles that were developed like a long time ago, over 100 years ago, for distance learning, things like that. That's more important than the technology. I know I rave on about technology all the time, but getting that content right, and what we were talking about with the videos and all that type of stuff.
And the chunking.
Yeah, and chunking and doing that, and take your time and really, really hunt out that feedback. That will be my advice.
Great. Ken, thank you so very much for all your wise words, and all the very best in Darwin. We wish you well. At least you're nice and warm, a little warmer than we are in Melbourne at any rate. And thank you so much to all the attendees who came along today to hear from Cam as well. And please feel free to reach out if you'd like to follow up and get any further clarification on anything we've raised for you today. Bye now, and thanks again, Cam. All the very best.
See you later. Bye.
Bye now.